Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm coming to you for today's video in front of my bookshelves because today is my very first book video. So I thought, what better first book video for my channel than to go through my favorite books from last year, from 2023, and also talk about my most anticipated reads for 2024. So I'm doing 10 of each because we could talk about it forever. But before we get into my top 10, I thought we'd recap what 2023 was like as a reading year for me. My reading goal last year was 100 books and I read 102, which is by far the most I've ever read in any year. So I was pretty proud to have reached that goal. My best reading month of the year was March and I read 16 books total in that month. I think it was a really big Kindle Unlimited month and I find I read super fast on my Kindle, so that is definitely not a normal month. I was averaging about 6 or 7 books a month. In total, I read 77 romance books, 20 fantasy books, 2 nonfiction books, 2 mystery books, and 1 literary fiction. So out of all those 102 books I read last year, I narrowed it down to my top 10. So let's get into it. I'm going to work my way down from 10 till 1, just to build the suspense. So in number 10 is A False Start by Elsie Silver. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars and I rated it 4 out of 5 spicy, so quite spicy. It is the 4th book in the Gold Rush Ranch series, and I actually started reading this series on Kindle Unlimited because I wanted to read Elsie Silver, but I thought that somebody was going to be getting me the Chestnut Spring series for my birthday, so I started with this series instead. Similar to Chestnut Springs, they're all interconnected standalones, which are my favorite kind of series to read, so you don't have to necessarily read them all, but I love reading interconnected standalones because I feel like you get to know the characters more as the series progresses. This is the last book in the series, so the 4th book out of 4, and I tend to like each book more in an interconnected standalone series as it goes on because I feel like you just know the characters even better and you get glimpses of characters from previous books and it just builds over the whole series. This is a small town romance based on a horse riding ranch. So it's got kind of like, it's not cowboy vibes because it's a horse racing ranch, it's more professional. It's got the small town elements. There's this book in particular, it has age gap, brother's best friend, forbidden romance. Do check the trigger warnings on this book though, because there is mentions of PTSD and past trauma, but I loved this series as a whole. I flew through them all. They're all available on Kindle Unlimited. And it was one of my favorite reads from the year. I still think about the characters and remember the story really well. In number 9 is The Final Offer by Lauren Asher. This is the 3rd and final book in the Dreamland Billionaire series, and it is Cal's story. I loved this book, but it was actually my favorite out of all 3. It is again a small town romance, but also a billionaire romance, so it's like the best of both worlds. It is a single mom trope, forced proximity, second chance romance. I loved the connection between Cal and Cami, the daughter in this book. I loved the connection and the history between the two of them. Lana's baking, the whole thing just had really cozy vibes to me. I also love like the renovation element of it. It does talk about addiction and that I feel like wasn't fully handled 100% the way that I would have liked in some of the characters' reactions to those sorts of things. So I rated it a 4 out of 5, just only for that little part. It also is quite long. I did find like in the middle of it, I was wanting it to speed up. So it's a 4 out of 5 for me, and 4 out of 5 spicy. Pretty spicy, but I like my book spicy, as you'll be able to tell by this top 10. In number 8 is Unfortunately Yours by Tessa Bailey. It is the 2nd book in a duology that she has based in Napa Valley. I much prefer the 2nd book to the 1st book. This is about Natalie Voss, who is like a Napa heiress. Her family owns one of the most successful wineries in Napa, but she's broken away from the family and is in corporate America, but has had troubles at work and has to kind of retreat home. She's lost her fiance, lost her job, and she's kind of licking her wounds at home. And then the male main character is August, who is ex-army, floundering around in the Napa Valley wine scene, doesn't really know what he's doing, and Natalie can't stand him because the wine is really bad and she's grown up around really good wine. And it kind of kicks off from there, like black cat, female main character with golden retriever, male main character energy. It's dual POV, which is my favorite. Again, it kind of gives small town vibes, even though it's in Napa. I rated it 4.5 out of 5 stars and gave it a 4 on the spicy scale. I just really obviously love small town romances, and I liked that the characters kind of grew with each other. The flood scene, if you've read it, you know what I'm talking about, is really like what nailed it for me. I liked the first book in this series too, but it felt a little bit more fluffy. This one felt a bit more gritty, and I understood the conflict between the characters and their motivations. So really enjoyed this read. Number 7 is maybe a controversial one, but it is Hopeless by Elsie Silver. I read all of the Chestnut Springs series in 2023, and this was my favorite. I know for a lot of people it was their least favorite, so that's why I think it's a controversial pick. I loved all of the Chestnut Springs series, but this was by far my favorite. It definitely was the spiciest in the series, which is maybe had something to do with it, but I loved Bo and Bailey together. I understood their conflicts as characters. I understood its marriage of convenience, and sometimes that doesn't seem necessary in the situation. It seems pretty drastic. I understood the motivation of these characters. I loved seeing them work through their trauma and their issues together. Their love felt really real because it was born out of growth of both of the characters. I just loved it so much. It was a great way to end the series for me. And as I said before, this is the 5th book in a series of interconnected standalones. So you get flashbacks to other characters from the series, and you kind of get little updates of where they are now with their romances from their books. So I tend to like the books later in the series for interconnected standalones because they just build on all of that character development that you had in the first couple of books. This is also dual POV. I love dual POV. I think it tells the story so much better. It is also an age gap romance. So if that is not like a pretty significant age gap, so if that's not your vibe, then this probably won't be for you. Overall, their just love and connection was really believable to me, and it felt less frivolous than the rest of the series. It was less like cowboy and more like those shades of grey, gritty people that have been through trauma and connect in a really meaningful way. So I loved this book. I don't know if I mentioned, but I gave this 5 stars, and it is like 4 out of 5 on the spiciness side, so pretty spicy. Next up in number 6 is A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair. I also gave this a 5 out of 5 stars and a 5 out of 5 spice. It is very spicy. It's a Hades and Persephone retelling, and I love that whole like Greek gods world. I don't know a lot about each Greek god, so learning what they look after and what their personality traits are like and who they're enemies with and who they're allies with, I found all of that really interesting. I thought that Hades' underworld was depicted in a really cool way in this book, and I listened to it in a combo of an audiobook and a physical book. I have heard that some people struggle to get through this and that it's quite long, so I think the audiobook helped in that regard, but it was really nice to read a different kind of fantasy that was kind of based in real life mythology that we kind of know bits and pieces about. The tropes are like fated characters, very morally grey male main character. To me, I think part of the reason why I liked it is it's kind of a coming of age story for Persephone. She doesn't fully know the capability of her powers, and so there's kind of that storyline running along the romance, which I really liked. Again, there is a really big age gap here. It's not like a regular romance age gap because Hades is like hundreds of years old and Persephone is only new, but it's still kind of that imbalance of power. So if that's not your vibe, then you might not like this. Also, in the Greek god world, Hades is obviously a bad guy and is kind of the enemy of everyone, or if not an enemy, they at least don't trust him. So it kind of is an enemies to lovers story, but they get over that pretty quickly. I will say this is the first book in a series. I think it's 4 or 5 books long. I have read 3 out of the 5 books and it really petered out for me, unfortunately. I loved this first book. I gave it 5 stars, as I said, but I haven't continued on with the series as of yet. It just felt like Hades and Persephone kept having the same conflicts over and over again, and it got a little monotonous for me. So that's the only downside. I haven't finished the series, but the first book, I absolutely loved it. The next book in the number 5 spot is Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. I am very late on the bandwagon with this book. I got gifted it in the original kind of beautifully illustrated cover, and I read it late in 2023. I loved this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It's like a 2 on the spicy scale. It definitely references spice, but it's not really the main storyline. I have to say I put this in the romance category, but it didn't really feel like a traditional romance to me. I liked it more for the variety of characters in the book and that feeling of found family. It's definitely centered around 2 main characters, but there is so many other characters that are really fleshed out in this book, considering it's not super long. As many other people have said on their channels, it is extremely toxic in a kind of like twisted relationship vibe, and throughout the whole book, characters are saying and doing things that are the exact opposite, and you're yelling at them in your head about why they're doing those things. But for some reason, it didn't frustrate me. In other books, when characters blatantly are making the wrong decisions or being dumb, contradicting what they've said in the past, it really frustrates me and it just makes me want to stop reading it because it doesn't feel like the characters are authentic to themselves and to what they believe in. But in this book, I didn't feel that way. They're definitely deeply flawed, but you're also really rooting for them, which is odd. I didn't feel frustrated at all through the book. I churned through it so quickly. I have already purchased Daisy Hates, which is the second book in the series that is on my January TBR. So I'm really excited to continue the series. I know that it's a lot of people's like holy grail, absolute favorite book / series they've ever read. I didn't feel that deeply attached to the characters. I really loved the story. It was different. It was super easy to read. I felt attached, as I said, to the like wider group of characters, but I didn't feel like heartbroken or super attached to either of the characters, but maybe that will come as the series builds. I have to say I was really intrigued by Daisy in this book, so I'm excited to read the second one. The next book in the number 4 spot is Done and Dusted by Lila Sage. I read this on Kindle Unlimited and honestly I picked it up for the cover because I thought the cover was really cool and it ended up being one of my favorite romances of the year. It's a small town kind of rodeo cowgirl cowboy vibe, brother's best friend, age gap, forbidden romance, childhood crush kind of vibes. I don't know what it was about the book. It wasn't anything special in terms of storyline. It just really stuck in my mind. I can still picture the cabin where she was staying. Female main character's name is Clementine Ryder, which I think is possibly the coolest name ever. And I just really loved her storyline in terms of getting back on the horse, literally and figuratively, into her sport, and the development with her longtime friend turn into lover, Luke Brooks, which is also another really cool cowboy name. Again, I just felt like their relationship seemed really authentic and grew out of a place of existing love. Her storyline in terms of what she was trying to achieve was one that I was rooting for, and I can't wait to read the second book in this series that's coming out in 2024. In the number 3 spot was Things We Hide from the Light by Lucy Score, and this was my absolute favorite romance book of the year. I love this book. This is Nash and Lena's story in the Knock 'Em Out trilogy. I read all 3 books in the Knock 'Em Out series in 2023, and this one was my favorite. Nash is the police chief, and Lena is like a private investigator, sort of like on that morally gray side of investigating. So they're kind of opposed in views already. There's forced proximity, PTSD, and kind of that, I don't know what the trope's called, but kind of like when there's that ticking time bomb on the relationship where one of the characters is not meant to hang around and, you know, kind of fights their feelings because they know that they're not supposed to be here forever, kind of thing. I think my favorite thing about this book and about the series in general is that there's a really good action plot alongside the romance plot. So I loved the plot in this book, and I read it so quickly, considering it's on the thicker side for a romance book. I read it so quickly because I wanted to find out what happened with the action part. I still think about these characters. I absolutely love them. Lena and Nash, and the way that they soften each other up and slowly take care of each other and turn all their like sharp edges and their barbed arguments into really protecting each other and loving each other. I just eat it up. I love this book so much. It is also dual POV, which is another one of my favorites. I love having both of their perspectives in this. And obviously, of course, the Knock 'Em Out series are also interconnected standalones. So you get flashbacks from characters in the first book in this one, and then you get more of Lena and Nash in the third book. I gave this 5 stars. Absolutely loved it. And 4 out of 5 on the spicy scale. It is pretty spicy in terms of actual spice scenes, but also their like thoughts and like the lust kind of nature of the relationship in the beginning. A lot of people did say that it was too long. It is pretty long. It's 574 pages, so almost 600 pages, which is very long for a contemporary romance. I have to say, I didn't struggle to get through it at all. It didn't feel like a slow burn to me because I think the action plot carried it. But if you don't like a long romance, then this one maybe is not for you. I definitely think I want to do a reread of this series in 2024 because it's just so good. In the number 2 spot for my top reads of 2023 is Fourth Wing. Me and the rest of the internet absolutely loved this book. Of course, you've heard people talking about it. I absolutely loved it. To me, it's like a cross between Hogwarts, Hunger Games, and How to Train Your Dragon. It was just such good world building. I didn't struggle to follow along, and such a good storyline that you were like really rooting for from the beginning. I feel like sometimes with fantasy books, the world building takes so long for you to understand that it can be pretty boring at the beginning and slow. This didn't feel like that at all. There was literally action pretty much straight away, and the world building kind of came throughout the novel. One of my favorite things is at the beginning of every chapter, I'll try and not give spoilers, like the little history blurb that's come from a text within the universe that gives us context to what's happening in that particular chapter. It is single POV from Violet Sorrengail's perspective. It is technically, I think, classified as a romantasy, but I didn't think that the romance overtook the fantasy at all. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars, of course, and I rated it 3 out of 5 for spice. It's definitely present, and it's definitely thought about and talked about in terms of like lust and attraction in this book, but I didn't personally feel that it overtakes the plot at all. I do love myself some romance and some spice, so I'm not bothered by it. My husband is reading this book as well at the moment, and he did mention that there's a lot of talk about, you know, infatuation and thinking about the male main characters in the book when Violet is in pretty dangerous scenarios, and he didn't feel like that was super realistic. It didn't bother me, but if you get bothered by that sort of thing in your female main characters, then you might not like this, but pretty much the whole world loves this series, so I think you're going to be okay. I did get a little bit confused throughout this book at keeping track of the places and the ranks and the names. It definitely gets better as you go on, and I also just finished reading Iron Flame, but I read that in 2024, which is why it's not in this top 10, but it definitely gets better as you go on. You learn the places of importance, and usually I found that if you don't know what something is and you just press on for a few paragraphs, it normally becomes apparent and you remember that thing that you were supposed to know. And last but definitely not least, in the number one spot, my favorite book that I read last year in 2023 is Throne of Glass, which technically is more than one book. I have not finished the series. I've read 4 out of the series. I'm reading it in the romance or the romantic order. So I started with Throne of Glass and read Assassin's Blade in 4th spot. You've probably seen this series before. It is a fantasy series that is based around a female lead character. Her name is Selena Sardothian, and she is like the most feared assassin in the land. And I literally can't say anything else because I don't know what's a spoiler, and if people are reading them in different orders, which you can do, then I don't want to give something away you haven't read, but it is so good. If I had to choose one book, it would be Heir of Fire as my favorite. It just is so good. Obviously, Sarah J. Maas was my favorite book of 2022 with A Court of Mist and Fury. I did reread ACOTAR this year also, but I didn't count any rereads in my favorites of the year. This series is definitely more YA. I don't know if it's actually classed as YA, but the chapters are really short, really easy to read. There's little to no spice. I think I rated it, 1 out of 5 on the spicy scale. It's definitely more of a like closed door situation, but I rated this whole series so far 5 out of 5. I absolutely love the characters, love the world building, so easy to follow, very high stakes. So many people have read this series and absolutely loved it. I'm late on the bandwagon. I'm only halfway through because I do find after I read a fantasy book, I need like a buffer or a break with some lighthearted romance before I read the next one. I very rarely will binge a fantasy series back to back because the information is just super overwhelming and the action is so high stakes that I feel like very anxious when I finish reading a fantasy book. So I haven't finished this yet. I'm also not gonna lie, they start getting pretty thick and it's pretty intimidating to get through 800 pages. So I was really thrilled to be able to start this series last year. Absolutely loved it so far. 5 stars all around, and I can't wait to continue it in 2024. So those were my top 10 reads of 2023. We had A False Start by Elsie Silver, The Final Offer by Lauren Asher, Unfortunately Yours by Tessa Bailey, Hopeless by Elsie Silver, A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair, Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings, Done and Dusted by Lila Sage, Things We Hide from the Light by Lucy Score, Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yaros, and the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. Now that we've covered off what my top reads in 2023 were, I thought we'd look forward to 2024 and some of my most anticipated reads. These are either new releases that are not out yet that I am excited to read because I love the author, or they're from an existing series, or books that have already been released that are just on my personal TBR for 2024 and ones that I'm most excited to get to. So first up on my most anticipated reads for 2024 is obviously the rest of the Throne of Glass series. I actually thrifted these books, so I am missing Tower of Dawn. I am trying to get my hands on it. I have the chunky ones to go. I need to just bite the bullet and get into it. I think these are actually out of order. I think Queen of Shadows is next, and then Queen of Shadows is next, then Empire of Storms and Tower of Dawn. I think I'm gonna do a tandem read when I read them for the first time, and then Kingdom of Ash. Obviously, I have to get my hands on Tower of Dawn, but I'm very excited to finish this series in 2024. Next up, continuing on the Sarah J Maas train, is Crescent City. I got the most insane covers. I think they're pretty standard, but I have seen the other covers and these ones are just so beautiful. I know the third book in this series is coming out, I think in January or February. I'm definitely probably not going to have finished reading these by the time that comes out, so I hope that I don't get too many spoilers, but I've loved every single thing that Sarah J Maas has written so far. I just want to finish the Throne of Glass series before I get into this. I have heard really good things about this series, but I actually don't know too much about it. I think this is the one that is set in a city rather than in like a traditional fantasy land, but that's pretty much all I know about it. I don't really know about the main characters. I don't know the plot of what happens in these, so I'm trying to keep it that way. They are both super chunky. They're like 800 pages at least. Yeah, they're 800 pages. So my reading goal for 2024 is actually 80 books. Last year it was 100 books. So I'm hoping that this year I can read less and do more social things, but also read longer books and not panic about, you know, not having time to read as many books in a month. So super excited to get to these two and build on the Sarah J Maas world. Next up on my 2024 most anticipated list is the rest of Magnolia Parks. This is Daisy Hates. I only have Daisy Hates at the moment because I am purchasing the original artwork covers. They have rolled out the mass production covers in Australia and you can get them really easily, but that does mean that the bookstores and like the bigger department stores aren't stocking these original covers. And the first one that was bought for me was bought in this cover and the tall format book, so I want them all to match. Like, the covers are just so stunning. Like, they're just insane. To get these covers in Australia is kind of pricey. They're like $30 a book. So I'm just ordering each copy as I read the previous one to kind of like space them out a little bit, so I only have this one with me right now. I'm so excited to pick this up, hopefully in January. Like I said in the first part of the video, I really loved Daisy as a character, and I think that I'm really gonna love this book, and hopefully, like I said, the rest of the series just builds for me. So, but I'm really excited to read Daisy Hates. The third book, I think that's Magnolia Parks, The Great Undoing, and then the fourth is Daisy Hates, Long Way Home, Magnolia Parks, Long Way Home, and then Daisy Hates, A Great Undoing. Don't come for me, Magnolia Parks fans, but I'm excited to read the series as a whole, and I think the fifth book is coming out this year also, so hopefully I can read this series and keep enjoying it in time to read that. Next up is Swift and Saddled by Lila Sage, which is the book after Done and Dusted. It is due to release in March, I believe, and I'm hoping that it comes out on Kindle Unlimited, but after the popularity of Done and Dusted, it might not. I think this is one of her brother's stories, and based on the storyline that we got in Done and Dusted, I think it will be like renovation, like small business owner, cowboy, small town vibes, which I love all of those things. So I think that that will be a really good read in 2024, and hopefully on Kindle, so super easy to digest and a great cover again that goes with Done and Dusted. Next up is Business Casual by B.K. Borison. This is actually the fourth book in the Love Light Farm series, and at the end of 2023 and beginning of 2024, I have just absolutely churned through the audiobook versions of these books. So I've read all three in the series up to now, and the fourth book is due to be released in July. So I'm really excited to get my hands on that. It is Nova and Charlie's story, and again, this whole series is interconnected standalones, so I feel like I have a lot of faith in this fourth book because we're going to get so many references from previous characters from the books that we've already come to know and love, so I have high hopes for this book. They're not like groundbreaking romance stories, but they're so cozy, sweet, small town. Can't wait for it to be released and to round out the series. It's always really satisfying when you get to like close the book on a series. No pun intended. Next up is King of Sloth by Anna Huang, which is due to be released in April. This is the fourth book in the Kings of Sin series, where each book is based around one of the 7 deadly sins. I just finished reading King of Greed and I loved it. The Twisted series by Anna is one of my favorite romance series of all time. I just love pretty much everything that she's written. So I'm really excited for this to come out. I think it's Sloane's story, which is the PR friend. So she's like type A, very like organized and diligent in her life and high achieving, and the book is called King of Sloth. So I think we're gonna have a character that's lazy, that doesn't care to achieve anything, and that is kind of where the conflict arises from. I'm gonna try and get it from my library because I have done the same thing for all 3 previous books in this series. It does just mean that I have to wait in line, and so I don't get to read it right on release date, but hopefully I can get in early so I don't have to wait too long. Next one is Sable Peak by Devney Perry. This is the last book in the Eden series. I think it's the 7th book. This book is already out. So it has been out for a while and I have been desperate to read it. I read all of the other Eden's books on Kindle Unlimited, and it's been really popular and took off on Book Talk. So when Sable Peak was released, I was anticipating it to also be available on Kindle Unlimited, and it's not. I think it's like $15 to buy, which is not that much. I should just pay it, but I am waiting with bated breath to see if it does become available on Kindle Unlimited after the hype of launch has died down. This is Mateo's story, who is the youngest of the brothers in the Eden's family, and also Vera is our female main character who we saw in a previous book as well. Mateo is a pilot. We know that from previous books, so I'm really excited to see where this book goes. The Eden series is another interconnected standalone small town romance, and it's another series that does the action plot alongside the romance plot really well. They are still super spicy, but the action plot in all of the Eden's books in terms of the drama and the intrigue that happens makes them super interesting and super easy to read. They're nothing like crazy, they're not 5-star reads, but they're just cozy reads that are super easy, and it feels nice to just finish off the family with Mateo's story. So I'm excited to read that soon. Second last most anticipated read of 2024 is Love Unwritten by Lauren Asher, and that is the second book in the Lakefront Billionaires series. I read the first book, which is Love Redesigned, in 2023 also, and really enjoyed it. I love everything that Lauren Asher writes. I loved her Formula One series as well, so I'm really excited for this to come out. We have the title, obviously, Love Unwritten, but we do not have a cover yet. I don't know what it's about at all. I don't know who the characters are. I'm assuming they will be characters that we've met in. As I'm saying this, I just realized that I think we got a sneak peek in a bonus chapter or an epilogue after Love Redesigned. I think it might be his brother that is a single dad trope, and it might be the nanny. I'm not 100% sure, but either way, I am really excited. I think he's a tech guy. Another billionaire. We love billionaire, we love small town romance, and those two combined are not very common and also very good. That comes out in June, so we should be getting a cover soon, which is really exciting. I actually have Love redesigned right here. I loved the cover of this. It looks like paint swatches because it's all like about renovations and like he's a builder and she's an interior designer. So the next one is about a nanny and a tech guy. So I don't know if it will be as construction-y, but we'll see. I love this cover, love the purple. So who knows? Excited to see what that one looks like. And last but not least is Fangirl Down by Tessa Bailey. I love Tessa Bailey. It is also another goal of mine this year to read her entire backlist because I love every single thing she writes. I think they're recovering a bunch of her older series and works to kind of revamp them. I've seen some at my library recently, so I'm keen to get my hands on those. But Fangirl Down is her new series. It's a golf romance. I think it actually comes out really soon. I think it comes out in February. I don't really know the premise of the story other than it's about a pro golfer, and I assume from the title, a fan. All I know is that I love how Tessa Bailey writes stories. I love how Tessa Bailey does conflict. Her spice is off the charts. So I know that either way, I'm gonna love this book. So I'm really excited for that one to come out, and it might actually be one that I purchase instead of getting at the library because I don't know if I can wait to get in line to read that one. So that is it, guys. Thanks so much for going through my top 10 reads of 2023 and the ones I'm most excited for in 2024. I hope it's going to be a really good reading year for you and for me, and I can't wait to see how the year unfolds and how many of those anticipated reads we get to and how many other ones are going to pop up throughout the year that we don't know about yet. Reading brings me such joy and it's the best hobby. I know it's a really solo hobby, but it just lets you escape life for a little while, especially when you're mostly reading romance like me. It's just nice to always feel like you're in the love bubble. I hope you're having a beautiful day or night wherever you are. Thanks for watching this video. I'll see you next time. Okay, bye. At the end of 2023 and beginning of 2020, Hades is obviously a bad guy, and